What is up guys, Top Tier Yu-Gi-Oh here, and today I have a Thunder Dragon deck profile for you guys. And now going into this format, I think a lot of us identified Thunder Dragons as being one of the top decks of the format, and for good reason. The ability to stop your opponent from searching, to have quick effect destruction, and then to have those with the efficiency that Thunder Dragons have is just incredible, and a lot of decks just can't deal with that. But another thing that I like about Thunder Dragons is how small the engine is. And that can be a bit of a double-edged sword because it makes consistency a bit of a problem. But the benefit is that having that extra space gives you the flexibility in your deck building to really mold the deck in the direction that you see making the most sense for the format. And now as for how I do that, we're going to find out in this profile, so let's go ahead and get into it. Starting with the Thunder Dragon monsters, we have the Thunder Dragon Trifecta, obvious in any pure Thunder Dragon deck. You're going to be playing 3 of each of these. These are your main engine Thunder Dragon monsters. They give you access to the rest of your engine. So between Dark and Roar, you have access to all of the cards in your deck. Between Roar and Hawk, you have access to all of the cards in your graveyard or banished zone. Then Dark has the extra utility of getting more copies of itself and being a quick effect, which is going to trigger your Titan. So these are the main Thunder Dragon monsters that you have to play 3 of. This is non-negotiable. Next we have 3 copies of both Matrix and the original Thunder Dragon. I want to play 3 of both of these as well because you also just want to see more Thunder Dragon monsters, because that again is going to allow you to get into your fusions easier and really just help you deal with that consistency issue that I mentioned before. Then the final Thunder Dragon monster we play is 1 Thunder Dragon Duo. The reason that I'm playing only 1 of these, I've seen some builds play 2, is because we are also playing a tech card that sort of deals with the graveyard, so it's not as easy in other decks to get a light and dark in the graveyard. And so because of that, I felt that this was just better as a one of. Like, you're not always going to be able to summon it, and so you want to kind of minimize the risk of dead drawing it, because again, the consistency is always an issue. You don't want to add more potential bricks in your deck if you don't have to. But I will say that it is powerful, especially combined with a card like Battery Man Solar. Like, you want to see it, as much as I hate to say it, some of the time, but not all of the time. And because it's still very easily searchable between Dark and Fusion, I think 1 is a good number for this build. And then to finish out the Thunder Dragon engine, we're playing 2 Thunder Dragon Fusions. Now again, I have seen some builds playing 3. I opted for 2 because I don't want to see it in multiples, and also it isn't good in every stage of the game. And so while it gives you access to your fusions, you don't need Thunder Dragon Fusion to access them. And so I felt that in a lot of hands, it's nice, it's great, but it isn't what's going to ultimately make or break your hand, but rather having like a non-engine card that's absurdly powerful is, or having a starter card that is. But usually Thunder Dragon Fusion, I found, wasn't the card that was as impactful, and so I felt that it wasn't necessary to play 3 of again, especially because it is so searchable. But this is definitely debatable, and let me know what you guys think. I'll put a poll up in the top right corner of the screen. Let me know how many Thunder Dragon Fusions you think should be in this deck. But also take a look at the rest of the deck and then sort of determine that as well, because the rest of the deck does affect the number of Thunder Dragon Fusions we play. Originally, I was playing 3 actually, and you know, it wasn't bad, but I needed space for other cards, and this was really the easiest cut. You know, you're not going to cut a Thunder Dragon, you're not going to cut a Matrix. Well, you could cut Matrix, but Matrix is still just important for having more quick effects for Titan, so it kind of reduces your ability to play defense in a sense. Like, Matrix and Dark in hand can sometimes act as defensive cards if you summon a Titan. Like, you need both of them, and so they're both sort of pseudo defenses in that regard, to where Titan by itself is not defense. Matrix and Dark by themselves are not defense, and Dark even has another purpose if, you know, not defense, but if you have them together, then they are a defensive combination. And so you do want to always have the ability to do that, because especially this format with Orcus running around, Colossus does nothing to Orcus. You have to be able to, you know, trigger your Titans. So you're definitely not cutting Thunder Dragon, you're not cutting Thunder Dragon Matrix. So in order to make space for the other cards, Thunder Dragon Fusion was a sacrifice that I could see this deck making. For the starter cards, we have 3 copies of Battery Man Solar and 3 copies of Aloof Lupine. I've seen a lot of builds playing 3 and 2, but I wanted to play 3 of each because I found it more important just to simply see 1 of them. I felt that I was losing a lot more games to not drawing a starter card than I was to drawing multiples since adding the 3rd copy of the last one. Like, you're not going to draw multiples that often, but if you're only playing 5, there are going to be a lot of games, and even with 6, there are going to be a lot of games where you don't draw 1 at all, and you want to really minimize on those games. Now, I think another benefit is that Lupine can banish copies of itself or copies of Solar if that's what you choose to do, and so that really kind of helps a good deal, because it makes it so that drawing multiple normal summons isn't awful if one of them is Lupine. Now, sometimes you're going to have, let's say, Lupine and Solar, and you determine that Solar is the best play. But there are going to be games where you open multiple Lupines or Lupine plus Solar, and you think that Lupine's the best play. And so in those cases, the secondary normal summon isn't terrible. And so I've really found 3 copies of each to be a really good number. Now, one thing that I do kind of dislike about them is how much variance it gives to your hand, because they're both good with different things. For example, ideally you're going to have Solar and then a Hawk. That's going to allow you to end on Appaloosa Titan if you're going first, or if you're going second. I mean, you can make a Boar Load, or you can, use a bunch of Nightmares to clear there are plenty of things you could do with this going second. But then Lupine is a lot better with Dark or Roar, because banishing either one of those from your hand is going to trigger the effect. You banish the other one from your deck, so you're going to end up getting both of those effects if you have Lupine plus one of them. That's going to lead to a lot of, I mean, you're going to get to your whole Thunder Dragon engine like that, so you're going to get to do essentially whatever you want within the engine. And so both are really powerful, but with different things, because Lupine plus Hawk, that doesn't do anything, and Solar plus, Dark doesn't do anything. Solar plus Roar is not terrible, because you can dump Hawk and then add back the Hawk and then use the Hawk's effect, but that's also not ideal. And so having that extra variance is a bit of a downside, but just having the starter cards is good. Hey guys, quick little interruption. If you guys are enjoying this video, don't forget to like it or subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it, and it helps the channel a lot, just showing your support. If you guys are wanting to see more Thunder Dragon content, supporting this video lets me know that, so I can continue bringing you guys the content that you want to see. But enough of that, let's go ahead and get back into the profile. I just realized that I never mentioned that this is a going second deck. I probably should have mentioned that at the beginning, but this is a going second build of Thunder Dragons, and this is primarily the reason why. It allows us to play multiple cards that are just super high impact, and I found that playing these high impact cards was just the greatest difference between winning and losing games. Like, the Thunder Dragon engine is good, it's very powerful, it does amazing things, but the downside is that it's just simply lacking in power compared to some of the other decks. Like, what you're doing sometimes isn't impactful enough. Summoning some number of Colossuses, what's the plural of Colossus? But summoning some number of Thunder Dragon Colossus sometimes isn't good enough, especially not in an Orcus based format, where Orcus is one of the most popular decks and arguably the best. It's not very good. Titan is not as consistent, because you have to have the activator for Titan as well, so that's not as easy to do. And so the current state of Thunder Dragon, I think, is really to capitalize on the deck's efficiency, but in doing that, you still need to get your power from somewhere. And while sometimes you're going to get it from the Thunder Dragon engine, sometimes you have to get it from, your flex spots. And these, I think, are some of the most powerful cards we could have played. I mean, Dimension Shifter is literally a skip a turn. It's going second dimensional barrier versus Orcus against Salamangreat, and even against, a deck like Striker, it can hurt them a lot, because they're going to end up banishing, maybe their engages, or, whatever they end up sending to the graveyard or using on that first turn, or whenever you use it, it's going to get banished, and that can hurt. Nibiru obviously is just insanely good in the mirror match against Salad, against Orcus, against Rogue. If you can't play around Nibiru, it's gonna beat you. And it also kind of serves as a bit of a going second extender as well, because it's gonna be putting Nibiru on board for you. That's 3,000 that you're gonna be able to attack your opponent with or link away with. So it's kind of an extender in that regard as well. Similarly to Super Poly. Super Poly is going to put a monster on your board to extend with, but also, I mean, clear your opponent's board, they can't respond. Too good not to play. And so all 3 of these cards are just incredibly high impact that when you see in the right matchup, which is really most matchups, you're very likely going to win the game. They're hard to come back from when you time them well, and it makes it easy for your Thunder engine to capitalize on this, and then from that point, you win on the efficiency. One last thing that I will say about these cards is that Super Poly and Nibiru are, obviously insane, but Dimensional Shifter is maybe a little debatable, and another good option, albeit not a budget option, is Phantasme. And I think Phantasme is great for this deck because, one, it puts a monster on board, which is going to allow you to extend with it when you're going second. 2, it's going to fix your hands, and so you can shuffle back some of the cards you maybe don't want to have. Maybe you open multiple normal summons. Maybe you just open a bunch of, useless cards, you want to put them back. But Phantasme is going to help you with that. It also is going to protect you from targeting, which against Salamangreat can be huge, protecting from that rage they likely set. It's going to help you against that, or Widowwank, or You know, depending on the matchup, there are lots of targeting that it can help you from. In doing that, it can put your Thunder Dragons in graveyard, so that maybe it sets up a duo. And so there's a lot of interesting ways that you can use Phantasme that are beneficial, and I would say that that's definitely one of the better alternatives. Another would be Impermanence. Impermanence is good because, one, it can be just negation on your opponent's turn. That's going to get through the Azathoth or get through the Appaloosa that your opponent might play to get through hand traps. So it gets through any of that. And it also has the ability to shut down spells or traps going second, or I'm sorry, going first, or if it's already on the board, you're going to be able to do that as well. And I think if you guys are watching the live stream of YCS London, in top 4, I want to say, Joshua Schmidt's opponent actually played a card in the same zone as an Impermanence, and it literally lost him the match. And so Impermanence just has sort of that flexibility and higher negating cards that makes it really valuable. And so I would say that's also an alternative. Again, that's not a budget one, but it's good. Alright, so rounding out the main deck, we have 3 Allure of Darkness, 2 Pot of Desires, 1 Upstart Goblin, and then 1 Gold Sarcophagus. These are the consistency cards. These all will help you get into the cards that really matter more often. So getting into your engine, getting into your Super Polys, your Nibirus, or whatever. And so they're incredibly important. Again, a huge benefit of Thunder Dragons is that you have the space to play cards like Allure of Darkness, Pot of Desires, Upstart Goblin. Like the fact that we have 6 spots that we can dedicate to just simply drawing cards is incredible. And then Gold Sark is sort of a consistency card, but also a bit of a starter card, but it's a very weak starter card. But it, you know, is one. You'd rather draw, you know, your other starters than Gold Sark, and you really can't draw them together. Like if you draw Solar plus Battery, or Solar plus Hawk plus Gold Sark, your Gold Sark doesn't really do anything. I mean, it can maybe, I mean, it helps, but it isn't super impactful in that hand, if that makes any sense. So when you draw well, Gold Sark has diminishing returns because it's slower on the sort of priority list under Solar and Lupine. But when you don't draw them, you really want Gold Sark as like something to get your play started, if that makes sense. So it's a low priority starter card, but most often I would say it's a consistency card, which is why I included it here. But you guys know how good Gold Sark is in Thunder Dragons, so I'm not going to talk about that anymore. Let's go ahead and move on to the extra and side deck. For the fusions, we have 3 copies of Colossus, 2 Titans. Now moving on to the other fusions that I play. For the Super Poly, I play 1 Starving Venom and then 1 Violet Chimera. Well, this is a Violet Chimera proxy, this card. I mean, it's the only fusion that I had that was also fire. I know I have a Violet Chimera laying around somewhere, but I couldn't find it. And I was not going to let not finding, you know, a singular extra deck card keep me from making this profile. So that's a proxy. 1 Violet Chimera and 1 Starving Venom. That's going to make your Super Poly live in the majority of matchups. In the mirror match, you have, you know, plenty of other fusions, Starving Venom, and then against Salamangreat, you have Violet Chimera. Against Orchis, you have Starving Venom. And then most rogue decks are going to summon, you know, some number of dark monsters. And, you know, like dark is just such a common attribute. It's pretty funny. But, yeah, Super Poly targets. For the Link 2s, we have 1 IP Masquerena, 1 Lambda, and 1 Phoenix. IP Masquerena is a huge addition to the deck because it gives you some sort of disruption that doesn't require having, you know, a dark or a matrix in your hand, and you know, it's sometimes better than a Colossus. So it just kind of diversifies your ways of interacting with your opponent on their turn, and I think that's exactly what Thunder needed. This could have been one of the best, this is really support for a lot of decks, but one of the best support cards that we could have gotten from the latest set. Very huge. Then we have Lambda, which is just a generic Link, and then Phoenix, which, while generic, is mostly used as just a breaker card. And now, one card that I recently cut is Some Summoner, and the reason I cut it was because of these two, really. So Phoenix you're going to play anyways, but originally I was playing Some Summoner and Lambda, but when IP Masquerena came out, I actually cut something else for that, and what I cut was Lambda for it. And then what I realized when doing this was that because I play Lupine and Nibiru, there are a lot of times where I couldn't link into anything because this requires 2 Thunder monsters. And so I couldn't really, I couldn't kind of link climb with it, which is usually what you're going to do with Some Summoner. And so I needed another generic Link 2. And while IP Masquerena is a generic Link 2, it sort of has a different purpose. You know, this is a finisher card in most cases. Some Summoner is not a finisher card. It's something that gets you to your end boards. You know, this is what you link with, you know, so you can use it to summon another Colossus, or you link with it so that you can trigger your Darks effect or your Roars effect to summon something else or search something. So it isn't, you know, this is rarely what you're ending on unless your hand's really terrible. And same with the Lambda. You know, this is sort of a link climbing card. It's not your finishing board. And so I needed a generic card to link climb with, and IP Masquerena was not that, and nor is Sum Summoner. And so I ended up having to cut this because I just needed to be able to do that. I found that coming up in a lot of games with both the Lupine and Nibiru. And now I felt that the one thing that I was missing out on was the ability to go triple Colossus, which you can do with Sum Summoner. It's something that you can only do with this card. But in a format where Orcus is so popular, and where Salad don't really, you know, Salad can out double Colossus, so what's the value in a third one? And same against strikers. If you play them, you know, they only have one Widow Anchor, so what is the value of the third Colossus? And I value that, or I figure that the Lambda is more valuable than the utility you would get from that. I feel like I just throw out a bunch of buzzwords, but I hope that makes sense. If it doesn't, just be sure to let me know in the comment section. I can probably type it out better then than I can right now. And now another card that is not in this extra deck is Rivo. And this was something that was pretty difficult to cut, but I found it only coming up whenever I had to normal summon Matrix and then link it away in order to really do anything, which is just when your hand is butt awful, you have to do that. But even in an average hand, that isn't the case. And so I found that Rivo more often than not wasn't necessary. And so I ended up having to cut it for just what I found to be more impactful cards, because if you have to summon Rivo, your hand is so bad that you're probably not winning anyways. And so I just ended up cutting it. But let me know if you guys still play it or what you think about that. Do you find yourself summoning Rivo very often? You know, maybe I'm just doing it wrong. I don't know. But I found it to be something that I could cut. And then finally, for the rest of the Link monsters, we have one Appaloosa, one Unicorn, one Borload, and one Avermax. Going from left to right, Appaloosa is just an absurd card again. Sometimes your Colossus and Titans aren't good enough. You need other ways of disrupting your opponents. IP Masquerena is one, Appaloosa is another. Appaloosa is also a way that you can play around Nibiru, which is huge against this deck. I mean, you cannot lose your board in Nibiru. It's very hard to come back from that. And Appaloosa is a way around it while also giving you multiple disruptions usually. And so the main way you're getting to this is if you have Hawk and Solar, but there's also combos with the Lupine that get you there as well. Especially again, if you have an extender like Nibiru, it's going to really help. So when going second, it's a lot easier to make. Then we have Nightmare Unicorn, which is a prime target for IP Masquerena. Being able to shuffle something back on your opponent's turn is really big. But then also when you're going second, which this deck tends to do, which I think is ideal, being able to, you know, get rid of a card with Phoenix, then get rid of a card with Unicorn, then link up into, let's say, maybe an Avermax, is very hard for a lot of decks to deal with. Then we have Borload Dragon, which is very important in this format because so many decks right now have monsters that cannot be destroyed or targeted, or yeah, there's a lot of monsters that are really tough to deal with right now. Whether it be against Orcus, you have Dingirsu to deal with, or in the mirror match you have, you know, the fusions plus their own, you know, other cards, like they might be playing Dingirsu or Avermax or something. There's plenty of cards that you just can't attack over, you can't destroy, and Borload deals with those issues. Again, one of them being Avermax, which I also want to play. Avermax was the last card I added into the extra deck, and I just felt that I needed another monster that was just more powerful. Something that when I summoned it, it meant that I very likely won the game. And I also think it's really good to go into with IP Masquerena. That we were getting IP Masquerena's affection, or protection, from the effect against destruction from card effects. But then you combine that with Avermax's own ability to not be targeted, plus you're not attacking over it, makes it incredibly difficult for a lot of decks to get over. Like if you're playing against Salamangreat, I don't think they have any outs to it. Like you're not attacking over it, you can't destroy it, you can't target it, so no Mirage Thalio. Like what do you do to get over this? Very difficult. Against Orcus, they have the same problem. There are really not very many ways of getting over it. Now they do have Dingirsu, but if they Dingirsu this, you just shuffle back their Dingirsu or something else, and now you don't have to deal with that. Plus they wasted a lot of resources getting to that point. It's just tough. And then in the mirror match, the only out is Borload, and if they Borload your Avermax, then you Borload their Borload, and then Borload back your Avermax, and then at that point you definitely win. And so Avermax I just found to be incredibly high impact. And so between it and Rivo, it's like Rivo is good when your hands are terrible. Avermax is good when your hands are amazing. And so I really would rather play for, or build my deck around the amazing hands, because that's what's going to happen ideally more often. Like you have to get lucky to win a tournament. Let's hedge towards getting lucky versus hedge towards getting unlucky. And then especially considering the consistency cards we play, it's not that hard to summon Avermax. And then the final extra deck card that I play is one Dingirsu. Dingirsu is really easy to summon in this deck because you have so many level 8s between your fusions. I mean, even the Super Poly fusions are level 8. And so it's very easy to summon, but you can also get it with a Mind Control in the Orcus matchup. And it's just really good in that matchup, again, with Mind Control, which is in the side deck. I maybe spoiled that one, but it's good in that matchup because of that. But it's also good in the mirror match for helping you deal with their fusions that you really don't have a way around. Like if they have double Colossus, there's no way for your deck to get around that outside of Borload or this. Moving into the side deck, we have 3 copies of Evenly Matched, 3 copies of Twin Twister, 2 copies of Cyclone, and then 1 Denko Sekka. These 9 cards are usually what are going to go in slower matchups for the 9 flex spots in the deck. So the Nibirus, the Shifters, and the Super Polys. So if you're playing against a deck like Subtears, a deck like Sky Strikers, against those decks, those 9 cards in the main deck don't really do as much as I would like, but switching them out for these are usually very high impact. And I found these to be the ones that I won it more often than not. Like Denko Sekka is a searchable out to back row, or a floodgate against back row more or less, that on turns 2 and 3 can be very powerful. And then we have the Twin Twisters and Cyclones to deal with, again, other back row. Twin Twisters especially because it's going to get things in the graveyard, which can help you trigger their effects if you have like a Hawk, or if you have a Duo, or even a Gold Sark, which can get you to your Hawk, your Duo, or to something else that you might need in order to utilize what you're discarding. So Twin Twisters has a bit of utility in that regard. Cosmic Cyclone, banishing back row is huge, especially against Salamangreat and against Orcus, or Sky Strikers too, really. Yeah, in most matchups, it's really huge to be able to do that. In Evenly Matched, I think is better in this deck than maybe any other deck in the format because we don't play any continuous spells or field spells or anything like that, and so it's live at any point in the game. So if we're winning the game, we don't need it. If we're losing the game, it's always going to be good, whether we draw it on turn 1, turn 2, or turn 10. It's always going to be good whenever we need it. So I'm a huge fan of Evenly. And so again, these 9 cards are what would come in the slower matchups where those monster-based cards aren't as powerful. Next, we have 3 copies of Mind Control. Mind Control I felt was one of the more flexible going second cards, and I side 3 copies of this for the matchups in which one of the main ones aren't as viable. And so there are cases where the main 3 cards, your Nibiru, Super Poly, and Shifter, aren't very good. And so I think the biggest example of this is against the decks that can play around Nibiru. So you're playing against Lunalight Orcus or Burning Abyss Orcus, which I've done a ton of videos on. Both of those decks can make Appaloosa and or Azathoth to play around Nibiru, or to prevent you from Nibiruing them. And those matchups, Mind Control is going to be way better. Or another example would be Dimension Shifter, to where against Orcus and Salamangreat it's really good, but in the Thunder Dragon mirror match it doesn't really do as much. But if you swap those out for the Mind Controls, now you've got something. And so all 3 of these cards, Nibiru, Super Poly, and Shifter, have situations where they're not as good. Now they're flexible enough and broad enough to cover most matchups, but they're not perfect in all of them. And Mind Control is kind of like something that can slide into any of their spots and sort of make it so that I still have just as many cards against my opponent when going second. And now the last 3 cards are 3 Eradicator Epidemic Viruses. This is for going first against Speller Trap heavy decks, because when they notice you're going to be going second, they're going to usually opt for you to go first. And then when that happens, you can side into Eradicators and eradicate your opponents. It's just incredibly powerful, very easy for you to make live, because you just have to summon a Colossus, and then that's the bare minimum. And at that point you can maybe auto win depending on the matchup. And so I found Eradicator to be an incredibly powerful and easy to activate sided card. Very good one going first. And so that rounds out the side deck. Again, we have the 9 cards, the Evenly's Twins, Cosmic, and Denko for when we're going second against a deck in which is not based around monsters. So we're going against Sky Strikers, Alter Guys, Subterror. Against those matchups, True Draco. These are all going to be a lot better than the Shifters, Nibirus, and Super Polys. Then we have Mind Control for any of the matchups where one of Nibiru, Shifter, or Super Poly is not as powerful. Then Eradicator for going first against more trap heavy decks. Now, one thing you will notice, which is a bit of an oversight, not really, I wouldn't call it oversight, but one thing you'll notice is that we don't have anything for going first against monster heavy strategies. And the reason for that is I still think that this deck, when going first, is good enough. Having the Nibiru or having the Super Poly, even when going first, are still very strong. The only thing that isn't as good is Shifter, but I think we can deal with having 3 cards in our deck that aren't good going first. I think that's maybe fine. One thing we could do is to maybe side it out for Eradicator when going first, but I also find that that isn't ideal. Now in some matchups we can maybe switch them for Twin Twisters or the Cosmic Cyclones going first. That's an option, but I found that it wasn't worth playing cards that were specifically good for going first to side the shifters out into against the monster heavy matchups. If I were to do anything like that, it would probably be Solemn Strike. That was something that I thought about siding or playing the main deck, because I just think a lot of decks right now can't play through it. You know, the pure Orcus deck, the ceiling is so low. Well, you know, it's not low, but low relative to what it used to be. The ceiling in the pure Orcus deck is low enough to where a single strike is good enough to really stop them, especially if you can combine it with something else. Same against Salamangreat, against Thunder, because all the effects are once per turn. Like, Strike is so powerful, so flexible and versatile that it's something that I heavily considered that be something to play maybe. But right now I think I'm pretty happy with not playing anything for going first, because again, Super Poly and Nibiru are just as good going first. Alright, so that is the Thunder Dragon deck profile, guys. If you guys enjoyed it, please feel free to like this video and subscribe to the channel. I'd really appreciate it. Once again, if you have any questions, comments, or concerns, leave them down in the comment section below. If you have any, well, again, suggestions, you know, again, let me know if you have any changes that you would make to the deck. Maybe you're playing a different version of Thunders or playing it in a different way. Maybe instead of going second, you think it's best to go first and you play, you know, more going first cards. Let me know how you're building your Thunder decks. I'm really interested in hearing about that. Again, thank you guys for watching, and I'll see you guys later.